When application completion rates drop, something is off. Students aren't getting the support they need, and that's affecting your numbers. Enter Element 451's AI assistants. They step in where students struggle, offering real-time answers and advice, guiding them through every step. Learn how AI assistants can boost your enrollment outcomes. Visit element451.com/AI team to learn more.
Welcome to The Application, a podcast focused on actionable takeaways to help you level up your marketing and enrollment management game. I'm your host, Dr. Allison Tercio, Assistant Vice President of Enrollment and Marketing at Siena College. Join me every Tuesday for discussions with some of the best minds in higher ed marketing and enrollment management. The Application is part of the Enrollify Network, a robust collection of podcasts designed to help higher ed professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal faves linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com. In this episode, we're exploring an aspect of the enrollment journey that doesn't get nearly enough attention, but plays a huge role in whether or not students follow through with their college plans, the emotional side of college planning. It's not just about getting students to apply, it's about understanding the fears, the anxieties, the emotional barriers that hold them back, and how we, as marketers and educators, can better support them. Our guest today, Dr. Raquel Bermejo, is an expert in this space with 15 years of experience, including teaching at Purdue Global and conducting research with college-bound students and their families at RNL. Raquel brings a unique perspective on the complex emotions students face during this process. We're going to dive in to how enrollment marketers can rethink their strategies to address these emotional barriers and create more empathetic, supportive communications that resonate with students. Welcome to the show, Raquel.
Thank you very much for having me.
I know you have some amazing research to share. It's already out there in the sphere, but we're going to have a conversation about it. But I first want to ask you a more personal question. I know your daughter is just out of college, and looking back on the experience that you went through as a family in her college application journey, I'm wondering, was there anything that really stressed you or her out, or something you wish someone had guided you all through differently?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Yes, there was. And I think it's something that probably affects a lot more families than what we think. In my case, it was my preconceived notion of what I thought my daughter should be doing and where she was going.
Tell me more. What, yours did align with hers, or she just ended up finding a home in somewhere completely different than what you thought would happen initially?
I think because I didn't go to college in the United States, my daughter in a lot of ways, even though her mom is educated, she's not first generation student in that sense, but because I didn't go to college in the United States, that in a way affected my perceptions of where she would be going. So I think I wanted her to have the experience I thought I could have had if I had gone to college in the United States. And it was completely different. It wasn't a good fit for her. Sophia thrives in smaller settings, and she needed a more personalized attention. And the schools I was pushing her to visit at the beginning were a total opposite of where she ended up going and really being very successful at. So through the research I've done both with the students in the research we're discussing today and with parents, which I'm constantly doing that research, I have come to the realization that there's a lot of that going around. So I wasn't alone.
For sure. No, I was going to say the same thing. One, you're definitely not the only parent who would say that at the end of the college search journey. And two, I think there's a lot of forms of first generation, and I totally think your daughter is a form of first generation. I think first generation are trailblazers, anyone who's doing the first something in their family. And she was the first one going to college in the U.S.
In the
right?
U.S.
So definitely. In my family, I was the first one who went at a traditional age. My mom went to college, but that was a completely different experience. She graduated the same year I graduated high school. Right? That's different than Miser. So I think there's all kinds of different forms of first gen. So let's talk about that research. From your research, what would you say are the top 2 emotional barriers or fears that hold students back from maybe even starting the application process? Let's start there.
Yeah. So one thing I actually came to the realization by doing this research was that a lot of people actually weren't talking even about the emotional aspect of college planning, and specifically that 12th grade of high school, where students are actually doing all the application process. So acknowledging that portion is a huge factor for institutions and anyone who works to help them. And for the students, what we found was that the financial anxiety was the top factor that not only kept them from applying, but also kept them from finishing the applications. And that actually had a lot of arms. It was about not knowing if they could afford to go to that college, not knowing how they were going to pay for it, not understanding how they qualify for financial aid or scholarships, and not knowing what the steps were in the process. So all of those things as they related to financial anxiety, that was the number one factor that really made students anxious and stressed.
What a great insight, Raquel, especially on the application starters, because I think our natural inclination as enrollment marketers with an audience of application starters who have not completed or perhaps completed the form but never got their recommendation in or their transcript in is just to remind them, like, come on, where's your rec? Where's your transcript? Get it in. Tell your counselor. We want to be able to review you. And we can rethink this, and maybe we need to be addressing some of the things that would actually be on their minds that are holding them back instead of just telling them the items that are missing, which I think is the go-to in that situation. Next, I actually want to go back to students who are their first in their family to go to college. But before we get there, if you're enjoying this episode so far, please take a quick second to pause and rate the show wherever you're listening, or send yourself a voice memo or a reminder to review it later. It's the number one thing you can do to help more people listen to these important topics. So first gen students, let's go back. In particular, we know they face unique challenges. What have you found in your research that might surprise people about what these students experience from that emotional side of the college search process?
So we found 2 things that were exactly like continuing generation students. It was the financial aid anxiety and the admission process anxiety. They were there. They were number 1 and number 2, but they were more heightened. So if, for example, continuing generation students, 65% of them were saying the financial anxiety was keeping them from actually applying. That for first generation students was like 74%.
Wow.
And the same difference for the admissions process anxiety. So those top 2 factors were the same, just stronger. And then the next 2 other roadblocks for applying or completing the applications for first generation students that were a little bit unique to them, where they were also less comfortable reaching out, asking for help, which it really broke my heart, because being a former high school student and understanding that those students are actually the ones that really need more help, they're also the ones that are less comfortable asking for help. And there was like a 16 percent point difference between first generation students and continuing generation. So that was a huge relation for me in this research. Also, first generation students are more likely to feel pressure, I think it's from within, about getting bad grades in college. There was a question in the survey that asked them about things they were excited about when they got to college. And also on the other end, they asked them to share the things they were fearful about when they got to college. And this was number one for them. They were afraid that they weren't as prepared as other students. We asked them to share in comments their experiences, and some of them felt like, gosh, does everyone know a secret that I don't know? Some students wrote, and other student wrote, I'm afraid I'm not doing the right things to get into the right college, which I think it's sort of like reaches back to that aspect of they're less comfortable asking for help, but also they're putting a lot more pressure on themselves about that academic preparation.
And it sounds too like this pressure, there's only one perfect right college for me and I must find it. And it's on me to find it.
That's it. So many of them actually selected as one of the fearful, the things that made them afraid about going to college was going to the wrong college.
Yeah.
And that has stopped me right on my tracks because it first broke my heart, but it just made me wonder, how are we communicating that to them? That there is only one right college you can go to when there are so many that you could be successful at. And they are putting that pressure on themselves. And that in turn is actually making them not apply.
That's so interesting. And that's actually something that we can play a role in, right? If you're an enrollment marketer and you're listening, first of all, we'll make sure to put RNL's research and Raquel's research all in the show notes. So you can go and look at what Raquel is talking about in detail, because I'm sure everyone is thinking about that. But also, we can do something about this. How we talk to students, we create some of this anxiety. Or maybe not all of us, but the way that we are marketing our colleges, the way we are talking to students, communicating with them, we might be putting undue pressure on them. And we need to start thinking about how can we flip it and be leading with empathy and compassion instead. Are there other concerns that students, because I think what we assume, if you're an admissions counselor or financial aid counselor, the student is going to raise their hand and they're going to say, this is what I'm worried about. Particularly when it comes to cost, right? We kind of expect someone to come out of the woodwork and say, I can't afford this, I need help. Or where we build systems actually, right? For people who are raising their hand and saying, I'm not sure, but it sounds like there's these hidden concerns for students that they're not voicing to colleges and universities. And we might be taking that for granted.
You're absolutely right. So there are two things that have come out of this research that were sort of like the hidden fears of these kids. There was a list of them. That's all in the report. But two of them that were key, I think, or there are key to taking that a step and applying or not. One of them was the sense of identity. We all know that college is a time for exploration, but we need to remember that we are trying to sell college to children.
Yeah.
I mean, they are
who are making a huge decision and have never made this level of decision in their life. Yeah.
Exactly. At first, they are still going through a period of growth where they're not, for many, many years, they're not going to be who they are going to be as people when they grow up. But they are finding themselves, and they are very worried about not making friends, finding a group in college to belong to and not fitting in. They're also excited about those things. So when we ask them about what are you excited about, it's like, oh, joining groups and finding friends and
meeting new people.
Meeting new people. But those things were the same things that they told us they're afraid of. So
talk about hidden, because they're saying it's the thing they're most excited about, but it's also the thing they're most scared about.
Exactly. Wow. And I think a lot of the materials that you see out there, admissions, enrollment, they paint this picture of excitement and friends, and you can come. We have 730 clubs. You're going to find a club to join. And that to student in rural Oklahoma who goes to a high school with only 300 students.
I was going to say, they don't even have that many number of students, let alone clubs in their school.
Yeah. It could be, too much. It's truly too much. And it actually could be too much even to someone like my daughter who graduated from a high school that had 2,000 students. I think breaking it down to a level where a child might actually understand it might actually be a long way into still keeping that excitement going, but breaking it into steps so that they understand that it is doable, that they're not going to be alone in a campus that's gigantic, or that there are going to be people there to help them basically every step of the way. And I think what's more important, it's even providing them with an opportunity to make friends before they even get there, to find their people before they get there. So
that'll help them feel comfortable for sure. It sounds like you're giving some great ideas about breaking it down into more consumable steps for them, being more conscious about the content we're choosing to put out there and considering how would this make a student feel on the other end, maybe beyond just what do we want to portray about our college. But it sounds like this is like a mentality change is what you would be advocating for, like a mindset change that we all need to take on, knowing this information about these emotional barriers that are stopping students from applying, from actually enrolling. So how does it look like in practice, do you think, being able to make that shift?
This research is co-sponsored by ZIMI, and we've had a lot of conversations with them about what does this mean and how do we move forward. And the title of the report is creating a culture of care in enrollment. And we didn't get there by just finding something catchy. We got there by rethinking about what this really means for institutions. I mean, it really is a change of paradigm and the way we're looking at it. It's about prioritizing empathy and also making sure that we are being transparent, or as transparent as we can be, and that we are putting the students' well-being at the center of everything, and that we are truly making our process student-centered, not institution-centered, which I think it's what we've been experiencing for the last few years.
I think that's a hard transition to make. And the expectations at our institution might be to be focused on the institution first, right? So it's not even just about a change in how we're communicating with students. It's a change in how we're advocating for them and explaining to people why we might be shifting our strategy and be shifting our messaging. So Raquel, if you are me or someone else who leads enrollment marketing or perhaps executes on email marketing for enrollment teams or something like that, I want you to put yourself in one of our seats. What's one actionable idea that they can implement tomorrow, now knowing this research?
Creating authentic messages, no matter what the medium is, I think is probably something that doesn't require a lot of a lot of manpower, and it can be easily accomplished by an institution. And in those authentic messages, I'm talking about actually asking students questions and being open to receiving responses. I can think of an email saying, how are you managing the college planning process this year, Allison?
Are you feeling stressed?
Are you feeling stressed? Exactly.
What stresses you out the most? I love that. I think we talk a lot about personalization in our field. And I always say, let's get to personal, like an email that feels personal when the student receives it. And that isn't mail merging a bunch of information in, I don't think. I think asking questions that make a student feel like you matter to me right now and I want to know what's going on with you and I want to get to know you. I think that's the number one way actually to make a personal connection with a student.
Absolutely. If you have 500 applications that are not completed, instead of sending them a cookie cutter email that reminds them again of the deadline that's really going to stress them, maybe send them an email that says, what's the most stressful part of this process? How can we help you?
Yeah.
And see what happens.
Yeah. One of my tricks is giving them ABCD or 1, 2, 3, 4, because if you give them options, a lot of times they'll reply with A. So say you do A, cost, B, time, C, I don't know how to write my essay. You give them what the things are that you think would be stressful. And then they usually are pretty willing to reply at pretty high volume, actually. So you have to be ready for the volume and you have to be ready to answer empathetically and personally to each student. Some of them will say all of the above. So that's a whole email if you have to answer all the pieces. But yes, I find that they'll quick answer that. Whereas if you ask them what's stressing you out the most or how are you feeling about it, they might not know necessarily how to answer.
You're absolutely right.
You give them a small playing field and they write back really quickly. And then from there, the conversation has opened, right? They have that door is cracked open and now you can do something to support that student individually.
Absolutely. I love it.
All right. There's your idea, everyone. Now, all the students are going to start feeling very loved by all of our institutions because of our enrollment marketers who are listening right now. Raquel, thank you so much for sharing these insights. They're very, very important for our audience to hear.
You're very welcome.
College planning can be such an emotionally charged process for students. And it's clear there's so much we can do as educators and enrollment marketers to create that culture of care, support, and authenticity. Before we wrap up, where else can our listeners connect with you and learn more about your research and your work?
They can find me on LinkedIn, and I would love to be connected to them.
We will have Raquel's LinkedIn linked in the show notes as well. So thank you again, and thanks everyone for tuning in to this episode of The Application. Remember, supporting students emotionally through their college journey is just as important as providing them with the academic tools to succeed. So until next time, everyone take care. The Application is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed tech shows that are jam-packed stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our shows help higher ed marketers and admissions professionals find their next big idea, and they feature a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Day Kibbles, Jeremy Tiers, and so many other of your favorite higher ed leaders. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.